Director with New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. I know folks are just sort of adding into the room. We appreciate your patience as we get started this evening. I want to do a quick introduction to our agenda tonight, but most importantly, a little bit of housekeeping about how to use Zoom. I know people are becoming more and more familiar, but if you could change your name, because I know sometimes you get on your computer and someone else used it before you, or maybe it says some random thing. And when you roll over your own picture, which usually appears in the bar there, and you click the three dots, you can actually choose rename, and you can type in your name. And then if you want to say your name and your town or some affiliation, give us more information, that would be great. That's helpful when we get to the questions. We know who it's coming from. If at any time you have any questions, some folks have submitted them in advance, which I'll get started on. You can put them in the chat box. It's a little bubble in the center of your screen. And if you can't see that, you got to go over to the right-hand side at the bottom, and you will see three dots as well. We're getting a little bit of an echo, so folks can mute.
Got it.
Thank you, sir. So today we're here with a really special guest, Senator Bob Smith, to talk about the environment and issues ranging from the recent impacts of our stormwater and the hazardous algal blooms that are creeping up on our lakes once again this year, and to some of the new challenges at the legislative level in the face of COVID and how that's sort of changed the work that's ongoing in the Senate and the work that he's doing. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about what these changes mean for open space in New Jersey, clean air and clean water protection. And then finally, we're going to do a sort of a question and answer section. And we hope to do this in about an hour. And we have some great sponsors, or I would say co-sponsors, who made tonight possible. The Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, Pinelands Preservation Alliance, the Center for Aquatic Sciences at the Camden Aquarium, and the Highlands Coalition. So I want to just open up, giving each of those groups a chance to say hello and introduce yourself. These are awesome organizations working on the ground. We partner with very frequently. And if they're in your local area, we just ask maybe there's a way for you to get involved in their ongoing work to conserve the environment. So I don't know if Jacqueline, you're here from the Pinelands Preservation Alliance, or another representative. It was kind of hard to tell with so many participants.
Hi, Ed. Thanks so much. This is Jacqueline Rhodes from Pinelands Preservation Alliance. I'm sorry I don't have my video on. I'm having a poor connection, but I just wanted to say hi. And thanks to you, as well as all the partners to put this together. And thank you, especially Senator Smith, for being here this evening. And we look forward to the conversation.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline.
Like Jacqueline, I'm with PPA. This is Barbara Trout, a trustee. Greetings, everyone.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks for coming. And then is Kelly here with the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed as well?
Hey, Ed. This
Awesome.
is Kelly. Good evening, Senator, and hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Knudsen, State Policy Manager at the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, which is a program of New Jersey Audubon. We unite over 160 organizations to preserve and protect the watershed through policy outreach and collaboration. So especially right now and on the state level, it's pivotal that we're advancing maintain levels of funding for the river basin commissions and state agencies like the Department of Environmental Protection, as the Delaware River watershed is one of the Mid-Atlantic's most important and unique natural resources by flowing through 4 states and supplying drinking water to more than 13.3 million people across the region, with 1.4 million of that number being residents in New Jersey alone. So we're glad to be working alongside our trusted partners on these issues and applaud the Senator's continued leadership on reducing single-use plastics in New Jersey, which we proudly support. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Kelly. And then we also have Brian Duval, who's the president and CEO of the Center for Aquatic Sciences at the Camden Aquarium.
Hi, good evening. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight. And the Center for Aquatic Sciences is a STEM and aquatic science education organization located in Camden, New Jersey. As a not-for-profit, we have a wide array of education programs and youth development programs that we focus on. And in addition to that, we are very active members of the Alliance for Watershed Education of the Delaware River, which is a network of 23 environmental centers throughout the Delaware River watershed. And also are members of the Discover the Delaware initiative, which really focuses on access and on-water programming in the back channel behind Petty's Island and up the Cooper River, which was just designated as a Category 1 stream, and probably the first urban section of river that has been categorized as such. And we're very proud about that. We need to celebrate it in terms of getting people out on that body of water so that they can begin to enjoy it into the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then Elliot Ruga from the Highlands Coalition as well.
Thank you, Ed. Great to be here. Good to see you again, Senator Smith. My name is Elliot Ruga. I'm the Policy and Communications Director for the New Jersey Highlands Coalition. We are a true coalition of today 103 organizations who have a common interest in protecting the water and other natural and cultural resources of the New Jersey Highlands, which New Jersey's economic stability and quality of life are tied to. The Highlands provides tremendous benefits to the entire state, such as accessible outdoor recreation, clean water production, a vast reservoir of New Jersey's biodiversity, and its intact forests provide New Jersey with its greatest asset for climate resiliency. And even though we have a Highlands Act to protect it, thanks in large part to Senator Smith, who was a prime sponsor, because property values here in the Highlands, here in the more densely populated northern half of the most densely populated state, only continue to rise, and the pressures to develop only increase. And there are constant attempts to weaken the regulations and undermine the Highlands Council. Our major issues today, there are many, but the ones that rise to the top right now are fighting harmful algal blooms so that the largest lake in New Jersey doesn't close again. We're still grappling with Highlands appointments, even though the governor nominated 3 excellent people to the Highlands Council. We're still grappling with senatorial courtesy, and perhaps the senator can help us with that. We're also trying to reverse the rollbacks to water quality regulations by the previous administration, because there are 4 projects, major development projects here in the Highlands that are advancing in their permitting, which could never have advanced except for these rollbacks. So glad to be here, and thank you, Ed.
Well, thank you, Elliot. We appreciate your partnership. All the groups that I mentioned, we work very carefully and closely along the Delaware River watershed. I thought I would do something I have never done before, which is share my screen and a quick overview about what New Jersey LCV Education Fund is working on currently, and then we'll go over to the conversation. So let me make sure I can do this properly. Share my screen and over here. Each year, I should say every legislative session, the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters Education Fund pulls together a wide array of environmental stakeholders, as well as our members, and we actually work with the legislator to put together a legislative priority list. And the reason we do it every 2 years is a legislative term is 2 years. So that's a sort of legislative session. Although senators from time to time have a 4-year term, each session of the New Jersey legislature is 2 years. And so this started this past January with the new session, and Senator Smith joined us in December to launch the agenda. And I remember him saying, we're doing another agenda, we're not even finished yet. And I'm going to talk about one of the items that's on there that was sort of leftover business that was done actually in the last session that's on this agenda. Let's see here, did I lead them both? So New Jersey League of Conservation Voters Education Fund is a nonpartisan nonprofit. We bring together environmentalists from every political background and folks working on the ground in different organizations as well to convene the community and really put together a dynamic agenda. Our C4 counterpart actually gets involved in politics. You might be familiar with them, but tonight's event is not about that portion. So top 5 agenda items. So number 1 is achieving the 100% clean energy future. There was a piece of legislation that was passed, and I guess that would have been about 2 years ago now, which gets us to 50% class 1 renewables, which is solar and wind, by 2030, so in the next 10 years. The prime sponsor of that legislation was Senator Smith, who we're going to be hearing from today. But the rest of the way, that next 50% to 100%, which the governor has talked about, hasn't been codified in legislation. And we really want to do that. But we want to do it in a way that is environmentally sound through an environmental justice lens. And we've seen a lot of the racial disparities. We have to make sure we center this legislation on making sure the communities of color are benefiting from the transition to a clean, renewable economy. And they're the hardest hit and disproportionately negatively impacted by pollution. So there isn't a bill specifically that addresses those racial disparities and the clean energy agenda, but we're working on those details. I mentioned one thing that was already done, and that's in the modernizing our transportation sector. EV legislation that was passed into law just in this last January. Rebates are going out now to folks who drive electric vehicles. Also electrifies all of New Jersey Transit buses, which is awesome. We are fighting for increased funding for New Jersey Transit and also funding for the Gateway Access Tunnel, which is critical for our corridor. Reducing pollution and environmental justice communities, there's a bill S232, which addresses cumulative impacts. It already passed the Senate, which is awesome. Thank you, Senator Smith. And it needs to be taken up in the Assembly. It has seen a roadblock there. So we're working very hard to make sure we continue to move that legislation. In the chemical safety reform, there's legislation to ban the residential application of neonicotinoids. These are bee killers. So you see a nice picture of a bee here. They're very powerful, but often improperly put on, and they end up washing their way into our waterways and finding their way. They're very pervasive. So passing that ban on the neonicotinoids is another piece of our agenda. And then in our lands and parks, New Jersey as the most densely populated state, we've got a lot of preservation to do. I have a picture here of the Palisades. Senator Smith will remember the LG tower that was trying to be built above this would have stuck out like a sore thumb. Luckily, that was held back, but there is an act to make sure the whole region stays less than 35 feet, so below the tree line, to preserve what is a beautiful national treasure. In addition, single-use plastics and banning them. Look at this, another trend. We're on the phone with a senator, the chair of the Senate Environment Committee, already passed the Senate, and that is a great thing, but we do need the Assembly to pick that up as well. So that's the end of the sort of introduction to what we're working on. I want to thank, I keep doing the same thing. I want to thank Joe Hendershot from my team for putting, tonight together and, really working to make sure all of you could be here. I'm going to do a quick introduction to Senator Smith. I'll let you do a quick opening statement and we'll go to questions. So Senator Smith was elected in 2001 and reelected 5 times. He served in the Assembly from 1986 to 2002, and he has sponsored legislation reforming the Garden State Open Space Acquisition Program to focus water resource protection, preservation programs, as well as the Highlands, as Elliot talked about, providing a continued source of revenue for New Jersey state parks, and setting in place measures to help improve water quality in the Barnegat Bay, including comprehensive fertilizer controls. He's also co-sponsored 2 constitutional amendments that were approved by voters to provide stable funding for open space and farmland, historic preservation, and another to dedicate natural resource damages and the awards that come from polluters back to the communities that were harmed to restore the environment. Senator Smith has served on the Piscataway Environmental Commission and Planning Board. He was a councilman from 1977 to 1980 and mayor from 1981 to 1986. He has 2 master's degrees, one in chemistry, which is awesome because that's my degree as well, but only undergraduate, and another in environmental science. So it's no doubt that he really is passionate about these issues because he understands that science is critical. And we see that every day in the work that he does. He graduated as well from Seton Hall Law School and is owner of a Piscataway law firm called Bob Smith and Associates. So Senator Smith, thanks for joining us. And I don't know if you want to share anything about what you're currently working on, sort of the lay of the land for your committee, which is the Senate Environment Committee, things that are happening right now.
So Ed and all, I'm hoping in this term to get a number of things done. One, of course, is our unfinished business from the last term, which is the passage of the single-use plastic bag and styrofoam ban. Got to get that done because plastics are doing so much damage to our environment and to our health. It's an environmental crisis, but it's a public health crisis as well. And on that note, I had a conversation recently 3 weeks ago with the speaker, Greg Coughlin, and he promised me he's going to post this single-use plastics bill. Now, I don't know if he has any changes in mind, but he says he's going to post and get it passed. So I take that as very good news. In that same topic area, we're now working hard on a recycled content bill. And if you think the Highlands was complex, you should try to do recycled content because it's brutal. It's like a super environmental chess game times 1,000. We're also going to, I hope, undertake shortly food date labeling. We put together a food waste package, everybody knowing that we waste about half the food that we buy in America, which is a tragedy. And we have 4 out of 5 bills passed. The last bill is the food date labeling, so that there is labeling in New Jersey that's consistent and it will benefit food banks in a tremendous way. We hope to get PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, done, which will provide a new source of funding for making buildings, businesses, homes, institutional buildings like schools, etc., energy efficient. Provide a new source of funding for that. We're working right now on grid scale solar. You've seen how ambitious the governor's energy master plan is, all of which we heartily endorse, but somebody's got to get the cold water and splash it on everybody. We're never going to get solar done if we allow the restrictions that were put in place by Governor Chris Christie, stay in place. All right, 5% of our energy in New Jersey is renewable. It should be much, much higher, but we have restrictions on where we can put solar. So grid scale solar is going to hopefully change that. Also, dual use solar, which you may or may not have heard of. And what it is getting 2 uses on the same property. The panels are higher, and you do farming underneath, maybe sheep grazing or production of hay or soybeans or whatever. The neonics was mentioned earlier on. We got to get that to the finish line. So those are in the category of the, not everyone would call them more mundane environmental bills, but they're the ones that are, I think we have a possibility of passing. In the category of the really tough bills, but the ones that are absolutely essential to the health of New Jersey and the planet, we need a constitutional amendment that changes the paradigm on fossil fuels. And that constitutional amendment would say, as plants are retired, no more fossil fuel generation to replace it. The energy has to be replaced with renewable. Now, some people on the line may say, well, geez, you're not doing that fast enough. And the truth of the matter is I totally agree. I think we're frying as we sit in our chairs tonight. Our planet is frying. In fact, if you get a chance, there's a fabulous, only way to describe it, fabulous, New York Times magazine section. The entire magazine section, it's about a year old, is on the global climate change. And the title on it is 30 years ago, we could have saved the planet. The only thing I would point out about this article, it's probably the most depressing thing you'll ever read, because it kind of says we're past the tipping point. But, the existential crisis is fossil fuels and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the planet heating. And it's really bad. So we need to change the paradigm. It's not as fast as everybody would like. Everybody would like me to just flip the switch, no more fossil fuels, but you can't do that. It's economically impossible. So these plants live about 20 years. As each one retires, take it off the grid, put on more and more renewable. We also have another bill divesting the state pension funding from fossil fuel industries, more to send a signal to the entire world that enough is enough. We're putting our lives and our children and our grandchildren at risk. We've got to do something about it. These are, however, cosmic ideas. I mean, they're big, really big, and they have a lot of resistance. The biggest area of resistance is from organized labor, who's a good friend of mine. You know, we have been supporters of labor unions forever, but they're very concerned they're going to lose jobs. And when you have a pandemic that has, you know, this high level of unemployment, when everything is in doubt, that the world is filled with risk, they're very much afraid of being supportive of this. And what we have to do is to work with the labor community to educate them that this is actually going to create more jobs, which is one of the reasons why you better vote in November, because, you know, I firmly believe, and one of the reasons I'm very happy this is a 1-hour program is so that we can listen into the last night of the Democratic National Convention. And I'm hoping Joe just blows it away and talks a lot about renewables and the renewable economy that hopefully is coming very, very soon, and really is the key to our survival. So that's what I'm up to. I'm open for questions.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit, and I think people who are on the, I guess, watching and on the line, what's it like to be a legislator? You know, you have a very strong background. You've been doing this for some time. You're my senator, which I'm very proud of. If folks are just thinking about dipping their toe into becoming an elected official, you know, any advice that you have for them?
Yes.
You know, what's it like in today's day and age? How has it changed?
Yeah, well, actually, the change is actually constant in this world, and in the political world in particular. And this is in the category of evolution rather than revolution. It is very hard as a quote outsider to work in a political party, run for office, be successful, and start to influence public policy. Now, I can only tell you about my case. When my wife and I moved to New Jersey, we went to married student housing in Piscataway. And the first time we ran was for Democratic County Committee, and we ran against the organization. And we had the students all mobilized, and so we were elected. And the night that the party reorganized, you know, the leaders of the party sent one of their minions over, and they said to us, "So are you working with us or against us?" And our answer was, "We're with you. We're all Democrats." And by the way, this goes for Republicans too. We're here to help. And we were committee people for several years. I ended up getting on the Environmental Commission. My wife became the treasurer of the party and ultimately the chairman of the party. But what I'm saying is that it's very hard, especially when your heart is pumping and the adrenaline is going through your veins, to say, I got to get in there. I got to go to the top. I got to change what's going on. The way in which political parties work is that they reward or recognize people who work in the vineyards. So go work in the vineyards for a little bit, and then raise your hand when there's a legitimate opening for something, whether it's on the town council or whatever, and when there's an opening in the assembly or an opening in the Senate. But what you're doing is working your way up. And as you do, first of all, you're going to get a lot smarter, because you're going to find out one of the truths about American politics, which is it ain't easy. You know, trying to get a majority of people to agree on a course of action is very, very tough stuff. And you have to be well educated in whatever the issue is. You have to be able to persuade people, and it's hard. So my advice, which is not the advice that a lot of the people who are between 20 and 30 want to hear, is work in the fields. But really, that's the key to success. You know, show people that you are not only hardworking and courageous, but you're knowledgeable, and work your way up. So that's my best suggestion. On the other hand, you might want to be AOC, challenge the member of Congress who has the fourth greatest seniority or leadership, and take him out. All right. I will tell you, it's unbelievably rare that kind of stuff happens. Revolutions are not easy. So I'm the evolutionary guy. That's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, it's so interesting how many elected officials start in a revolution, whether it be as a committee, running against the party as a committee person, or taking over the party with a bunch of committee folks, and then, you know, becoming part of the institution and from there and opening up doors for things to happen in the future. So in full disclosure, I'm on my local school board in town. It's very enjoyable, and I can say they're always looking for good people to get involved, and it's a great way to know people in the community and work that way as well. So Elliot talked a little bit about this, the Pinelands appointments, and the Highlands appointments, and there is really a logjam. Those are not, going as quickly as we need them to be. In fact, in the Pinelands, they're very, very short. And in the Highlands, there's a lot of people that need to be swapped out. Can you give us a little status update?
Sure.
And I don't know if you want to chime in a little about some of the intel or things that you've heard. We're hearing sort of in, Hudson County, there's basically a block. I guess senators can file and say no new nominations. And so lots of appointments are being held up in that area.
Well, in the case of Highlands, first of all, we finally got one done. Dan Van Abs, who is
Great
just
choice.
an outstanding, unbelievable, just a great addition to the Highlands Council. And if most of the people on the line probably know his background, but it's just stupendous in water resources. So you have two other appointments that have been nominated, one which involves several Essex County senators, and one in which involves Senator Doherty. And the guy who Senator Doherty has courtesy over is probably somebody who knows everybody on the line here, Bill Kibler.
Yeah, Bill Kibler, who went to Marine Corps.
West Point
Yeah.
with Mike Doherty. So, I was begging my way through Dan Van Abs, and we got Dan finally in the right position. And I go to Mike Doherty into a Republican caucus, and I say, Mike, you went to school with this guy. He's a smart guy. And he said, oh, I didn't know he had been renominated. I said, oh, okay, he's renominated. We need you to uncourtesy him. And for those people who are on the line who don't know what courtesy is, you can't get it unless a senator signs off. You can't get appointed to be dog catcher in New Jersey. It's an old unwritten rule, but it's the rule, and neither Democrats or Republicans are ever going to change it. So in any case, Mike said, "Oh, I'll uncourtesy him." Well, so next session he's not on the list again. So I said, Mike, what happened? He said, well, I will definitely take off my courtesy. I will sign for him, but there's some things that I need. So he's talking to the front office on whatever it is that he needs. And hopefully this fall, we're going to be able to take care of whatever his issue is. And at that point, Bill will move forward. Now, in the case of the Essex, where the Essex senators haven't signed off, you need to do what is the strongest thing that any citizen can do, which is to write your legislators or call your legislators. So people who are in these senators' districts, and I'm not talking about somebody who's down in East Windsor calling an Essex County senator. You need the people in your organizations or the people that you know, or who knows, social media, but you need to get people excited about calling and writing their senator to say, this person is a really good person. And they have the environment at heart. They're very knowledgeable. It's important to me that you sign off on them. So what I'm saying in a nice way is, democracy is not easy. It's not a free lunch kind of thing. You got to get in it to win it. And what I'm saying is you need to lobby for them. And likewise for the Pinelands, the Pineland, I get a little more input on Highlands only because we sponsored the act and we went through it. And, we know the issues up there really well. In the Pinelands, the way it's described is it's a South Jersey thing. All right. Now, that's like one of the great mysteries in the universe. I don't know what a South Jersey thing is, but I would recommend to you the same strategy that should be used in North Jersey. First of all, if I assume the nominees have been nominated, you need to, even before you say put them up on the agenda, you need to talk to the senators in your district to say so-and-so is a terrific person, very knowledgeable. Would you support his or her nomination? Write to them, call them, ask for an appointment, go see them. Democracy is a contact sport. You got to tell them it's important to you and that they, as your senator, really should represent your views on this. So it's got to be ground up. Got to make sure the senators are there, and you're not going to have somebody courtesy that person at the last minute. So that would be my recommendation.
We're going to try to get someone to put up the contact information of the folks that have that senatorial courtesy over the nominated candidates. So in another question, Montclair State University recently announced, you probably were following in the news as, former teacher of environmental science, it was divesting itself of management responsibility of the New Jersey School of Conservation, which is, for folks that aren't as familiar, more than 70-year-old environmental education institution, which was established in perpetuity in New Jersey in the legislature in 1981 for the citizens of New Jersey as an environmental center of learning. And so there's a nonprofit called the Friends of New Jersey School of Conservation, which was formed in 1980 to set up and protect and support the School of Conservation. They submitted a proposal in partnership with a number of colleges, environmental organizations, to Montclair State and the New Jersey DEP, proposing a reopen and restart plan for the School of Conservation under new management as a sort of a public-private consortium. And so I think folks are really interested in making sure that that happens. Particularly, the school is shuttered right now. There's no maintenance. And as anyone who has had anything that they've left untouched for some time, they decay very quickly without humans keeping them up. An RV or a car, things start crawling in them. And so folks are interested to know if you're going to support that proposal to help the Friends reopen the institution, and any requests for funding. I think that was funded originally at about $1 million a year. I think folks are looking at least to get 3 years of funding to make that transition happen, to sort of get it off Montclair State's books and then out into this like sort of public-private partnership.
So number one, I absolutely am supportive. I've heard only good things about the school and what it did. But I would, again, like to suggest a strategy to get to the finish line. We have a governor's budget going to be presented next week in the Rutgers Stadium in Piscataway. And you're going to hear a lot of pain. You've seen that the legislature authorized $10 billion in borrowing just to meet normal service needs for the state. So the issue is going to be, no one's going to say to you that they disagree with the idea. The issue is going to be money. So here's my strategic suggestion on that. I think you need to get money from a source that's not in the budget. And the way you get money, one idea, and listen, you can take this idea and apply it to other possible sources like philanthropists or some various foundations that are very concerned about our issues. But the one that I think is overlooked is natural resource damages. We get natural resource damage awards. They're not in the budget. It's new money, and it's supposed to be used for environmental purposes. So one of the ways that you can have some of these polluters who are doing the NRDs kind of help the environment along is to support a program like this. So I would say have the organization contact the commissioner of the DEP, put a proposal together, say you need the $3 million. You're asking that it be considered for an NRD, Natural Resource Damage Award. It's going to be a one-time shot, but if you got your $3 million, that's supposedly what you need to make the transition, and then have a lot of environmental organizations support it. And that's money that's outside of the budget. It's something that you don't expect, and it's constitutionally required to be used for environmental purposes. And as I think everybody on the phone call knows, we have a real attorney general here, not a fake one like at the national level. We got a real one, and he's going after polluters in this state for the first time, in 8 years. We had 8 years of Chris Christie where there was no environmental law enforcement and no attempt to seek natural resource damages. This guy's the real deal. So, and maybe even put it in his mind as well, that the school would be a great use for NRD funds. So that's my suggestion.
Okay, good. We're still going to make a push for the budget, though. We
Oh,
understanding,
absolutely.
that these are tough times. I don't think anyone expected this timing. It really wasn't. There wasn't a lot of heads up given to the school that this was going to happen. Not a lot of time to make a plan, which is an unfortunate scenario. So if you have a question, if you can put it in the chat box, we got some questions there as well, which I'm going to get to in a second. So pipelines, power plants, compressor stations, obviously,
Yep.
lots of proposals. You mentioned the constitutional amendment, which would say no to this further expansion. Want to give us a little update on Penn East and this proposal in New Jersey Transit for what they at one point called a backup power generation for the train system, which is now a full-time fossil fuel plant to power New Jersey Transit trains. Kind of, where they're tracking, if there's a role for the legislature, which I know has spoken out on a number of these projects before.
Right. So there are different categories. All right. The New Jersey Transit proposal is a governmental proposal. And my belief is that it's like any other governmental proposal. It lives or dies with the support that it has. So, you need to press hard with the governor, the front office, the New Jersey Transit Board, with legislators, with everybody, why this is such a questionable proposal, all right, and that there may be much better alternatives. In the case of pipelines, it's kind of in a different category, and it's in a different category because probably the in addition to the planet frying, the other, I think, huge issue associated with it is it really needed? In none of these cases is the criteria that there is a need for this. You have to put in 13 pipelines instead of 2 to supply the needs, even with growth, for New Jersey. So my belief is the best approach is the constitutional amendment, where you're not having power generated by fossil fuels of any kind, because what that does is to reduce the demand, and it reduces it dramatically. All right. And if you said this was adopted tomorrow, you probably would not need another pipeline in New Jersey of any kind. Now, the other thing that gets in here is that I got a chance to weigh in on these things in other ways. You may or may not be aware of the fact that I sit on the State House Commission. State House Commission is the least known entity in state government. But what we do is we review requests for easements or to cross our properties. And if what I've tried to do in my public life is to not take a public position against anything, because if I take a public position against it, I can't vote in the State House Commission or even try to convince other members of the State House Commission about what the right thing may be to do or not to do. So it's a little bit trickier in my particular case because I have this dual role. And if you want me to be able to vote, I'm not supposed to take positions. If I take positions, I'm a prejudiced judge and I have to recuse myself. So I think the ultimate solution is changing the paradigm on fossil fuels in New Jersey with the constitutional amendment. And I think the rest of it will take care of itself.
I mean, certainly that I think that helps. It's the New Jersey Transit project, with the current occupant of the White House, clearly a fossil fuel solution is one that's going to be preferred by this administration. And we hopefully are just months away from a change in that area. It seems, looking at alternatives is something that's really important. And storage, with the way things are taking off, could provide a lot of resiliency without the use of fossil fuels. So capture with solar and store for, another storm, et cetera, like that. So that's going to be important. And thank you for that. So on someone had asked a question here. I'm going to go to the chat box around offshore wind, and sort of where is that? I know it takes a long time to get a stick in the ocean, as it were. You're probably following that pretty carefully. Want to give a quick update to folks on how we are in meeting our dream goal of expanding offshore wind?
Well, we've made a start.
Yeah, starting.
Made a start, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
They've let one contract. The governor's increased the coal to 7,500 megs, all of which is fabulous, but you still don't have one built. Now, the company that won the bid is going forward with it. I hear from BPU people that they are on time and they're, checking the boxes and dotting the I's and crossing the T's and moving forward with it. But I'd like to see it stick in the ground just like you would. They're saying it's happening.
Yeah.
So, it's hard for me to turn to the BPU and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about, and that's.
Well, and you want folks to do it right? Environmentally sensitive, make sure that the corridors for migratory species and the sensitivity of like marine mammals and whales and the pounding sounds of pilings, that they're using the right construction methods. And I think one of the great things that we've seen too is, the offshore wind port that's being done, so we can really capture the green, new, clean energy jobs that are local union jobs for families here in New Jersey to benefit from, happening. It does take some time, but as the senator said, it is progressing, I think, on schedule. There doesn't seem to be any indications that way. There's another question sort of in the climate area around New Jersey's, I think you mentioned maybe when you were on a call with NJBIA around black carbon and having some legislation that could reduce black carbon. And there's a sort of a question, how would you measure that and what would sort of the goal be with that?
And the answer to that is I can't give you an answer because I'm meeting with the commissioner by Zoom in two Fridays from now. And that's one of the topics for discussion. I need to, the last time the DEP was not a big fan of doing black carbon in the bill. I originally had black carbon in the bill.
Yeah. It
was a problem for them. So I want to have a frank and candid discussion with Commissioner McCabe about what would make it work for the DEP.
Okay. And do you want to explain what black carbon is for folks so they know?
No, I'm going to put you to work. You explain
it. Well, when you burn stuff, it doesn't all become complete combustion, which would be carbon dioxide and water. That's pure combustion. But the side products are all kinds of particulate matter, co-pollutants, things that like mercury, right? We've had the mercury rule, which really reduces coal usage in power plants because one of the co-pollutants. And then the stuff you see come out of the tailpipe or the smokestack of a truck, and that's black carbon. And it's very hazardous. It's bad for your lungs. It's what gives coal miners black lung disease, and you want to stay away from it. And it also sulfates are real problematic, causing sulfuric acid, which erodes our streets and changes our pH of our lands and water. So it's a whole cycle.
Ed, you did a great job.
Only because you put me on the spot. I was looking for you to do that. All right. So water, obviously critical. Drinking water is inextricably linked to our success in New Jersey. It has to be reliable. It has to be affordable. It has to be plentiful and cheap, right? Because we have a lot of water dependent industries like our pharmaceuticals and manufacturing, the Budweiser facility that's just outside the Newark airport. And we're not flying a lot right now, but we know when we land there, we see that. And they're there because that's where the people are and where cheap, reliable, clean water is. And so it's really important. And the emergence of these contaminants that we now realize have a negative health impact and are pervasive, like PFAs and PFOAs, are critical. I know the New Jersey DEP has done some rulemaking around restricting these, one of the first states in the country. Anything on the horizon? Well, I would just not limit it there to other emerging contaminants.
So McCabe, as you know or don't know, was an EPA enforcement person. Has a lot of experience in it. And we have been talking about it for the period that she's been the commissioner, and she acted. You now have rulemaking that sets standards for PFAS in drinking water. And what that means is that water treatment plants are going to have to treat, and it probably means additional systems and using charcoal filtration, but they now have rules and regulations. They have some time period to catch up to meet them. But that's an unbelievably strong action because first of all, the rest of the country, under the leadership of the EPA, is doing nothing. I mean, literally doing nothing. New Jersey is literally way ahead, miles ahead of other states. So that's the good news. The other good news is that, like other water contaminants, this is going to be the subject of litigation. And it's a discrete number of facilities that generated the PFOAs for Teflon and for other products. And I think this has got to get on the Attorney General's radar screen so that we get the polluter to pay, because all of this cleanup is going to cost money, and the polluter should pay for it.
And it's a lot of it has to do with the fire retardants around military
Yep.
bases, et cetera. They would go out and do these drills, and they would use the fire retardant. And I don't think anyone really was thinking about how hazardous it was. And they just are very pervasive. They're like lifetime chemicals. They don't break down, and they are carcinogenic. And they just make their way up the food chain and bioaccumulate in fat cells, which means when you eat small things that have a little, you eat more, and then suddenly they're stuck in you. So it's a big issue. And you can see why having a champion like Senator Smith in the legislature is so critical. He's extremely knowledgeable. I think his commitment to these issues is clear as day. And he has negotiated some of the most challenging issues, through the legislature, through competing interests. And
Ed, you're reading that just the way I wrote it.
No, it's not written. I mean, it's true. I've seen you in
I'm busting
action.
your chops.
And I actually use one of your techniques, which I'll talk to you about over a drink one day. We usually have these actually while drinking beer in a local brew pub, because it's, their home brewed beer, or in this case, a microbrewery is using the water that comes out of the tap. And there's a connection there for the work that we're doing. But with COVID, it makes it difficult.
So LCB is all about the purity of beer. That's what you're telling me?
At least. That's just the beginning and end of the sentence. So another water quality issue is stormwater utilities. Legislation passed the Clean Stormwater and Flood Reduction Fund. Thank you for that. The governor signed that into law. We are working with local municipalities to help get those established. And we're hopeful that that can happen. And for folks that are listening, it's a small fee that's charged on concrete and pavement. The polluters pay to put in stormwater infrastructure, green infrastructure to absorb the water like a sponge, prevent flooding, and to clean it up. Any sense from your perspective, given your municipal connections, about interest around that? It seems like in COVID times, budgets are strapped, and this could be a good revenue stream for a line of work that needs to be done, and we can put people to work in these green jobs and protect our future.
Absolutely. By the way, I received in the mail this week an announcement from New Jersey Future that they've set up a stormwater utility website.
That's correct. And that's one of our partners on this program, and it's available. Maybe someone could put a link up there as well. It's very comprehensive. To learn more about it, if you're on your local environmental commission, et cetera, definitely check it out. It's very informative.
So in terms of a strategy, again, because there's just so much going on, that New Jersey municipal leaders communicate through two organizations, the League of Municipalities and the Conference of Mayors. Mm-hmm. Each of them have monthly magazines that go to their members, which are mayors and council persons all over the state. I think it'd be a great idea for LCB or anybody else to put together an article, maybe with New Jersey Future, about the benefits to municipalities. They're now legally empowered to do it.
That's right.
It's just put together the ordinance and away you go. Now, but I will tell you that I think COVID is a two-edged sword. On the one, that you're right, that municipalities are strapped. They can't find the money for these needed infrastructure improvements. But the other side of that is you have the fear in New Jersey of the three-letter word, which is the word tax. And many officials live in fear of, even when it's totally justified, to impose a fee for impervious surface. So it's an educational process. And that's why I think you should, get some monthly articles in those two methods of communication. And listen, are you guys ever going to do a booth down at the League of Municipalities convention?
We have. We do our party, which you've come to, and
I
then
have.
we've done a.
I've had a
booth.
couple of scotch and sodas on you guys. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember before we.
It's not reportable, however.
Before we passed the flood, it was widely attended. Before we passed the Flood Defense Act, we got those chamois. Remember?
Yeah.
Down there, Flood Defense New Jersey. I think I don't know what the status of this fall, but we've had a booth with Pinelands Preservation Alliance, a couple other nonprofits as well. So yeah, talking to folks going locally and about this has been an ongoing public outreach effort for us. So definitely. And we've had a couple pieces. I know the Urban Mayors magazine, we did do a piece in as well. And certainly any, connections you have to folks, maybe this isn't the right time or maybe it is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's, we want to get people to work. We're not particularly looking to give handouts to corporations in this time. If we can invest in our local community and stave off a problem that causes more damage in the long run, like flooding, it's really in our best interest. So that's kind of where we see the connection, but every community is gonna have to decide on their own, certainly.
Absolutely, no problem.
So there was a question about the Green Amendment that came up in the chat box. Delaware River Keeper Network has. I'm sure some folks have talked to you about that. It's something we're supportive of. Is there a sense for you about the appetite for moving something like that? The idea being—
Yeah, there is sense.
Okay.
The Linda Greenstein is the lead sponsor on that. And in both this session and the last session, either in the first or the second Environment Committee meeting, we hear it and we release it. So Linda is running with the ball on it. But I will tell you that it falls in the same category as my fossil fuel constitutional amendment and the divestiture bill. All right. Tremendous resistance. All right. And by the way, tremendous. Do you see some of the resistance that's now come up with Senator Singleton's environmental justice bill? Again, labor is totally, and I don't want to say paranoid because that's not quite the right word, but they're very concerned that they're going to lose jobs. And the same thing happens with the Green Amendment. So the pushback is humongous. And then there is a concern that there may be unintended consequences. So I'll give you an example. I went to an NCSL energy conference in Hawaii.
That's the National Conference for
of State Legislators.
National
Conference of State Legislators. And I serve on their energy task force. All right. In fact, we just published a good publication on the state of the grid and what needs to be done for grid safety and so on. But anyway,
in Hawaii, I just want to underscore that. It was a meeting in Hawaii?
Yeah.
Nice.
Listen, it's kind of an amazing thing that you may travel around the world to find out what other people are doing, but sometimes that's the only way to find out. And Hawaii,
they do really great geothermal and wave energy research there. We used to take when I was teaching high school chemistry, we used to take them there on a field trip. So,
yeah, well, and they're doing all kinds of things. So they're trying to get off fossil fuels in the worst way possible, but it's all the energy has to be shipped in unless it's renewable. And with renewable, there's limits on how much land is available. Land is a critical piece in Hawaii, but I'm trying to think where I was going with this. There was a big story. What was the original question?
No, the original question was, now I'm forgetting too, because I was so thinking about my days in Hawaii, Mauna Kea and surfing and luau's, all the things that we're missing currently. We were talking about climate.
Green Amendment appetite.
The Green Amendment. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank God somebody has a memory. Thank you. So anyway, in Hawaii, when we're there, the huge issue is the huge telescope that's going to be built. All right. And there is a tremendous amount of resistance from the native peoples. Now, this huge telescope was going to be built where there were 4 other telescopes. And the reason they're being built there is there's no light pollution, all right? But it's, you know, like a multi-billion-dollar telescope. And the resistance was based on Green Amendment principles, saying that it should not be built because da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And as a result, the project was stopped, and it's in the courts. And then the other place where I've heard Green Amendment in action was Pennsylvania. But the real, I think the basic problem with getting it passed is that you have to have a little bit of a history. I mean, I think you might be able to sell it to New Jersey legislators if you can show that in the states where it's been adopted. And I don't think there's more than 3, is there? Anybody know?
I am aware of Pennsylvania's in particular because it was enforced.
Right.
I can't say if there are others where they mentioned or not what that number is.
Right. So anyway, I think it becomes more possible of passage the more experience that there is with the amendment in other states. I think Linda will have an easier sell when people see that it's being used properly and it doesn't have unintended consequences. Remember, when you amend a constitution, you're really seriously changing the rules. And you know, I remember when the Sportsman in New Jersey wanted to amend the Constitution concerning gun rights, and you know, you get the same push. Well, you know, what's the problem? Second Amendment and blah 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 blah. More of the story is that with constitutional amendments, they're big deals, and I think that the concern that Linda will run into is that legislators want to know that it's going to protect the environment, but it's not necessarily going to stop everything from happening in the state.
Yeah, I mean, the research that I've seen, Ed Lloyd out of the Columbia Law Clinic for Environment, you know, it's like one more tool to use to help protect our air, water, and land. And, you know, since New Jersey's Constitution doesn't guarantee that protection, right, we need to add that in to be very, very specific, like it does for other things, which is great. So we're going to round out with maybe one more question. Really appreciate your time. This one has to do with a low carbon fuel standard. I don't know if you're following what's been happening in California and some efforts underway in New York with the low carbon fuel standard, if that's on your radar.
Not too much. I actually thought that might come up today, and I called Keval to say, what do you know, Keval? And Keval said, I don't know anything about it. You
well,
know,
let's
other than I don't think you're talking about ethanol, and it doesn't sound to me like you're talking about photo EVs. So what are you talking about?
Well, I think we could get together a little bit more on this in particular and see how it plays out in New Jersey. But the idea is, you know, like the CAFE standards, which raise the amount of miles that somebody needs to have in their car as it's manufactured to travel. The idea would be if we can have, you know, biofuels that are from sustainable sources. So I talked a little bit about the combustion cycle. You know, we produce carbon. If we use the carbon that's produced and the carbon dioxide and grow plants from it and then make it back into oil or something that we use, it sort of fits that sustainability model. And so moving in a direction more where the impacts are more towards a net neutral. So
right. So you're offsetting carbon by either reusing or recycling something that would have been adding other carbon. So let me tell you a story in response. You may remember the war that we had with food waste.
Yes.
Okay, not that long ago. And I actually received a letter with a lot of signatories from the environmental community, including the one that sticks out is Food and Water Watch, but there were some pretty legitimate organizations on it who said, we're opposed to this because the food waste will be used to make methane gas. And consequently, you are supporting a fossil fuel. Now, the truth of the matter is you put it in a landfill, it leaks all into the atmosphere. All right. And that methane is 50 times more impactful than carbon dioxide on global warming. So, I read that letter and I just shook my head. We're greatly reducing the amount of carbon dioxide that's being released. And we're also at the same time burning some of those end products, even though it is methane, it's renewable. We're calling it renewable natural gas, which kind of tells you about environmental issues in general. There's always like 17 sides to it.
Yeah. Well, I think the low carbon fuel standard it's not like so complicated, but it talks about the whole usage, right? It's the shipping of it. It's all these different components, and that ultimately lowers what is being injected into the environment. So, rather than just talking about the miles, it's also, where is it coming from? And some of the alternatives aren't as great as you mentioned. Some can be as, drilling into the earth, or definitely not across our shores, but in some places that's what they do. So this has been a really great evening. I think we got to most of the questions out in the chat box. Someone asked, and I'm just going to take a moment of privilege. So I'm a delegate for Joe Biden. So when I leave here, I'm going to go and watch tonight's
convention.
Thank you. And there has been some scuttle in the environmental platform around some amendments that had been made before it was presented to delegates. And I think it's making its way now more into the mainstream. And I would just encourage folks to, and so the idea is there was a line that was in it, I guess maybe 4 years ago or 8 years ago, that said the Democrats would remove subsidies to oil and gas industry, which is billions of dollars every year to exploit our land. Much of it is happening on public lands. And because that was taken out, that there's a sort of backsliding on the environmental platform. I have read the platform. I didn't know the story of the amendments. I think it's extremely bold. It calls for 100% net carbon energy by 2050, something that New Jersey coined under Governor Murphy, first candidate to commit to that. And we have hundreds of candidates across America that are doing that now. Talks about putting people into good, clean jobs. You mentioned Joe Biden's environment platform. It's not a commercial for Democrats and their platform, but this idea that somehow it's weakened, I think it's a little bit maybe dramatic to the reality of what's happening. And so I just say that it doesn't seem to me as a massive concern given what I've read, but I would like to hear more from people. This is a story that broke like yesterday into today. And then the last thing is someone's mentioning about hydrogen. I'll take one last question. We talk about electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles. Hydrogen combines with oxygen. It makes one product, water, and a bunch of energy. So it's kind of like a battery, but the raw materials in this case are the hydrogen in the car and the oxygen in the air. Is that something you see New Jersey adopting? Because right now I think we have one hydrogen fueling station in the entire state.
Yeah, the honest answer is I don't know. But what we did was to form a fuel cell study commission. And that's now, I think, out of both houses and I think on the governor's desk. And the reason, the bottom line reason here is that, again, you're not going to have a lot of chances to make the decision about which way you're going on renewable. There's only so many resources. They're finite in terms of public resources, and you better make the right decision the first time around. Yeah. So I think it needs to be studied. You need to look at the experience of fuel cells and hydrogen as a fuel, where it's being done, and see if that's the right way to go or not. But I don't think we should invest in 25 technologies. Mm-hmm. If we've come to the conclusion solar is it, with EVs as our source of energy for transportation, then do it. Get it done, because every minute we sit here, we're frying a little bit more.
Great. Well, I want to thank you again, both for being available tonight, for your leadership in the Senate, for always being available to talk to advocates and constituents, and just encourage you to continue to do the great work that you do. I want to thank everyone for joining, Joe Hendershot from my staff and the rest of the LCV team who's on the line, monitoring the chat box, making sure technologically we're all set to go. Keep up the important work, particularly with the budgets the way that they are, to make sure the programs we care about are funded. We always say the budget is look into our soul, our moral priorities. And these are some tough times that we're facing, but we need to protect our environment for future generations. And that requires all of us to be involved. And so I think we make a good team in that effort. And that's really going to be the job in the next few months for us to be on top of the budgeting process. So thank you again, Senator.
Let's go and have a great final night of the convention.
I look forward to that.
Thank you.
And thank you all. Take care.
Bye-bye now.